This is
Okay.
Hitman.
Hitman. Inspired by an unbelievable true story, a straight-laced professor.
Discovers his hidden talent as a fake hitman. He meets his match on a client who steals his heart and ignites a powder keg.
Of deception, delight, and mixed up identities.
God, I want to see this movie.
Boy, I'm there.
That sounds awesome.
It's a technically for log lines, give us a B plus, right? It's a bad genre. It's a lame genre.
I'm in.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that was kind of the magic of this. I get a call from Glenn asking, he had read this article, Hitman, by my friend Skip Hollandsworth. I did a movie, Bernie, based on a Skip Hollandsworth story. And I was like, Glenn, I read that article like when you were in junior high, probably back when it came out. Yeah, I read that article. I know it. I've thought about it as a movie over the years. And it doesn't seem to go anywhere. I mean, it's a great story. Great. We just got to talking about it. And it's so funny the way that came around. And I just, in my own little life with the story, like it went like this. And then when Glenn came on with ideas and stuff, it just jumped up to doable. I could suddenly, it made sense as a movie, the way we talked about it. But I got to know the real Gary. Talked to him on the phone several times.
One of the best things about them, many good things, but were the costumes and the accents that Glenn did and that you worked on together. So were some of those in the article? Probably some were yours, but which ones did you like the best? And,
I
don't know.
mean, we really went to town on those. Glenn really just, once we, that's how I describe it.
Well, you did give me a very long leash on
Yes.
what those characters were, but a lot of
Yes.
a lot of those characters, like some of those things, like we talked about, there was the
Yeah,
character with the scar, with the kid who's paying in video games,
Right.
like
A lot of those are based. I mean, we watched a lot of surveillance tapes of these actual arrests or when they're doing the deal, money's changing hands the moment that they get arrested. So we had a lot of research on that.
there's a lot of like
kind of true, but then exaggerated.
I think that's like probably the essence of this movie is specificity that we roll into something that's exciting to digest for an audience. And I think for us, it was always like about the audience. This is not a Gary Johnson biopic. This is a movie about a guy who sort of has a lack of passion and identity in his life, and by emulating passion and identity, he ends up creating it. You know what I mean?
Gets you in trouble.
Yeah, exactly. So the fun part about this, especially for those characters, is since real life retail hitmen don't exist, all of these characters really are part of pop culture. And because we were setting in modern day, we were taking, things that weren't in those transcripts with Gary when he was sort of an active, hitman.
So what was your favorite? I like the British guy with the plaid suit.
Dean.
That was
Dean, yeah.
I think Dean seems to be. If we did a poll, I think Dean's going to win.
Dean is a human nightmare.
He is.
He's a crowd favorite, but I think actually on marketing, I think they're trying to keep Dean.
They're keeping him under wraps.
They're keeping him under
saving
wraps. He's a
But
real.
the more I think about it, Dean could have stepped out of like a David Lynch film.
Can you do the accent?
Maybe.
Oh God, no! You don't want to hear me do the accent. It's
No,
he's
only for money. Would you do that?
You know what was funny is like
You're gonna do people's outgoing messages.
yeah, exactly. That'll just be like my new thing. I'll do cameos as Dean. The funniest thing about that character though is every character we kind of like put into a box of like what kind of fantasy. Like you look at the client and then you kind of build the fantasy from the client.
Reverse engineer it. Yeah.
And this is a guy who's been scorned. His wife is cheating on him, and he really wants to show her. He really wants to cause some pain. And so I was like, what is the most Anton Sugar nightmare? A man who you'd see, equally in a back alley and like an ice cream store. like the thing that like if he were near your child, you would scoop them up and run. And that is Dean. It was it was a fun one to play.
Bring me to another question. I was completely floored when you said at the New York Film Festival that there are no hitmen, that they're like just a trope of Hollywood.
Yeah.
So really,
Isn't that funny?
That's nuts.
Yeah.
That can't be.
The average aware, intelligent person goes through life thinking they're real. I had heard about this before. I read something. I'm kind of a true crime guy. But when I called up Skip after reading the article, and I said, it's right, there aren't really hitmen. And Skip took a pause. He says, there is no record. This is from a journalist. There's no record ever of a hitman being arrested, you know, and we define it. You know, there's people who are involved with mobs, there's drug gangs and cartels. When you're doing it on behalf of someone, that's a little different. But just the idea of, we call it a retail hitman. Like, look in the yellow pages and I need a hitman, and oh, you're going to
Well,
find
you don't go to
one.
Yellow Pages just like a guy who knows a guy who knows a guy, but then
Yeah,
they're
but
never there.
but you see how people do it. They're in
Yeah.
the strip club. They're in the, hey, you must know people who know people. It doesn't
Yeah.
exist, and it's completely illogical. And I've had some opportunities now to talk about it, like in a Q&A after. It's like, people are like, it doesn't exist. I go, it'd be so easy to catch them. Just flip the switch, and okay, I'm looking for someone to kill my, you know, and then have the hitman come up, give them money, and then arrest them. It would be so easy to, you know what I mean, entrap the
Yes.
hitman.
Yeah, totally.
It's like we go to great lengths to show the other way. That would be easy. The other tell is that you've never heard one arrested. You know, you always hear the big bust and they catch the Tiger King guy trying to kill his rival, but you never hear the flip. You never heard, you know, this hitman's been operating out of the Northeast, we think, for 20 years. And
Yes.
we finally got this guy.
Totally.
You know, we find these guys. It's, you know, he's been, you know. And then some people go, well, that's because they're so good they get away with it. Which
Well-
is, it's a really interesting pop culture phenomenon that I think this movie can bring a little, like, oh wow, it's because I think I felt that way all these years. I've read everything I could on it, and it's an interesting phenomenon.
Well, I think also one of the things that makes this movie unique is it is a fantasy, and the fantasy of a hitman is someone who can solve a very complicated life. We all get put into complicated situations, and this is a quick fix, and everybody fantasizes about the quick fix. And I think that's why people look at a person sitting across the table from them and want to believe in the fantasy.
It's so perverse too. It's like it kind of empowers people too to think they could.
Yeah.
If you push me any
It's
farther,
like a God complex, you know,
yeah,
like that
I
I
could.
can.
The only reason you're still alive is I've chosen not to
Totally.
hire a hitman to kill you.
It's a little bit
But-
of the American dream.
Yeah,
you know what
it's
I mean?
like it empowers the individual
Yeah.
a little bit. It's desperate people who are completely out of it. Is it entrapment? A little bit. They argue this in court. They don't all get convicted for various reasons. So yeah, you are watching a sting operation. Make no mistake. So often those are a little legally nebulous sometimes. You know, a little
I always-
murky.
I loved how we like also like show that in the movie though, like the other side of it. What a defense attorney, their perspective on what this
All
looks
they
like. A guy
have
who's
is-
putting on costumes and
Yeah,
putting on
you're the
accents,
faker.
like, you know, who are you? What are you trying to do? And what are you trying to prove? And who are
Yeah.
you trying to put away? So I think that's a really fun exploration. I'm really glad we have that in the movie
Yeah,
because
because it's a fair question.
yeah,
Yeah, once we realized that our love story entailed him being trapped in Ron's persona and enjoying that, liking Ron better. Ron's a better lover. Ron's more fun. Ron's more outgoing. Ron has more fun socially. It's like, yeah. And then the big question is, can you change? We'd all like to be a little more Ron. I wish I was. You know, I'm a Gary. I'm not a Ron. Largely
Yeah,
in most areas. But yeah, so the study of identity and the big question being, can people change? Can you, and I've wondered about this for years. I've read books about it and stuff. And there was a lot more studies that showing you can. That's what we worked that scene with the ex-wife. She's kind of a proponent of that. And it's like, well, that's something interesting to think about, because I think a lot of us do feel stuck. And I think it's an optimistic message, and especially in this era where everything's kind of on the table, you know, gender and everything. You can kind of be who you want to be. You know, that I find that really fascinating and kind of empowering. You know, so
I totally agree. I think that was always especially writing this during the pandemic, which I think a lot of people were going through their own identity crisis at the time. A lot of people were feeling stuck, you know, in their houses, but also in who they are, who they were with. And I think one of the things that we were talking about is just going out and seizing the life that you want for yourself. You don't know how many years you get to be on this planet. And at the end of the day, we are all these multitudes, you know, we contain all these multitudes. And I think Gary, this is the fun part about him, as you see the real life Gary Johnson, they would listen to him on recordings, and you know, a very, I would say, how would you describe Gary? Just a very
neutral
neutral
nonplussed.
person.
You bring
would-
it to him. He's a blank slate.
But when he would,
But
you
a
listen to these
confident
recordings,
professional,
yeah.
yeah.
When he'd put on these like accents, he became
Yeah.
the Laurence Olivier of fake hitman. He would become these bright, exciting figures, which
Yeah.
means we all have that inside of us. If you want to be one of these identities, you can go out and seize that. So I think that was like the exciting
Yeah.
part for all of us. Is it felt like sort of the a universal feeling in the world of people feeling stuck in who they were and what they'd become. And I think that's why this movie's maybe hitting with audiences.
And so you guys have worked on, I don't know, 3 or 4 projects together, right?
This is our fourth.
Fourth, I'd say too big, too little.
Yeah.
There were kind of two smaller parts. Well, when we first met, Glenn was a teenager who came in and did a scene in my movie. And what was that, 2005 we shot? It came out in
Yeah.
06?
Yeah.
Fast Food Nation.
2005, yeah.
He's a teenager hanging out at the high school. Paul Dano's in that scene. I don't know.
Yeah.
And then that was teenage Glenn. And then reconnect with Glenn however many years later as we did our college movie together. That was high school. Then we did college. Everybody Wants Some. And that's like our modern era. I'd say before that, it was, you only worked a few days.
Yeah.
I liked you, but it's not like we rehearsed a lot.
No,
we went
no.
through it, but it wasn't.
We were 2 Texas boys. I got to be on a Richard Linklater set, which is, again, growing up in Austin, idolized Rick and the fact that he was so part of the lifeblood of Texas film and the Austin Film Society and all these different things. So to be on that set was a very big deal for me. And then moving out to, LA to give this thing a shot and failing for a long time and then getting a huge opportunity to be a part of Everybody Wants Some and then finding just like a great collaboration, like a great shorthand. And I think we see film the same way. I think we see the end goal.
And then Apollo 10.5, I just call it Glenn and like, hey man, you play John Glenn, you come be a mission control, come be on the other side. You worked one very full day, but doing me a favor kind of. And so, that's how I hope life goes on. It's like, hey, you just float stuff out there and you connect with things. And I think when Glenn called me that was like, wow, it's kind of meant to be,
I think the thing that I really like, why I like working with Rick so much though, is that sometimes when you talk to people about film and creatively, right? Creativity is a very hard thing to sum up and what is good. I think we both agree on what is good. Like our end goal, we can circumnavigate all these different things and talk about all these different, we can be throwing stuff against the wall. And our creative process is not too protective. You're not too protective. I'm not too protective. But we both see the end goal. And when we get there, we're like, yeah, that's it. You know what I mean?
I feel like pushing each other. Glenn had this thing. It's like we're working on something. He's like, well, you know what I'm craving here? Like he's missing something. He's kind of missing something. That scene, we could find one more level. We never let each other off the hook. By the time we were going, hey, I think we got it. We really had it.
Yeah.
We each were pushing each other.
It's so.
And so I like a work ethic.